Before she was turned into stone, before the world called her cursed, Ahalya was already trapped. Not in a curse, but in a moment she could not fully understand. Most people believe she made a mistake, a moral failure, a sin. But what if it was never that simple? What if the story is not about wrongdoing, but about how quickly truth can be distorted when power, desire, and perception collide? And what makes this story unforgettable is not the curse, but the silence that followed it.
Ahalya was not just a woman. She was said to be the most flawless creation of Brahma, a being crafted with perfection, admired not just for beauty, but for grace beyond human measure. She was married to the great sage Gautama Rishi, a man of discipline, wisdom, and immense spiritual power. On the surface, their life was ideal, sacred, pure, untouchable. But beneath that perfection, there was a truth no one spoke about. In a world where dharma defined everything, there was no space for confusion, no space for doubt, and definitely no space for mistakes.
To understand Ahalya, you must look beyond what she represented. She was admired by all, but understood by none. The world saw her as perfection, but perfection is a lonely place. Because when you are seen as flawless, you are never allowed to be human. She carried beauty, but also a quiet isolation. She carried grace, but also the weight of expectation. And somewhere deep inside, there was a simple, unspoken vulnerability. She trusted the world as it appeared, and that would become her greatest weakness. The real conflict did not begin with the curse. It began with desire. Indra, the king of gods, a being who had everything, power, status, control. Yet, he desired what was not his. Not out of love, not out of connection, but out of ego. He saw Ahalya not as a person, but as something to conquer. So he chose deception. He chose to become someone else. One morning, when the world was quiet, he entered her space not as Indra, but as Gautama. And in that moment, reality itself became unstable. Because the danger was not force, the danger was familiarity. But here is the question no one asks. When truth looks exactly like trust, how do you recognize deception? Then came the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet moment where something felt slightly off. Ahalya stood between two instincts. Trust what she sees or question what she feels. If she trusts, she remains the devoted wife. If she questions, she risks doubting her own husband. And sometimes the hardest choice is not between right and wrong, but between certainty and uncertainty. In that fragile second, she chose to believe what appeared real. Not because she was careless, but because she had no reason not to believe. And that is what makes this moment tragic. Moments later, the illusion broke. Gautama Maharishi returned, and in an instant, truth was revealed. But truth came too late, because what he saw was not confusion. He saw betrayal, and anger does not wait for understanding. In that moment of rage, he cursed her, not with explanation, not with compassion, but with judgment. She was turned into stone, not just her body, but her existence,
silenced, frozen, erased from the world. And the most painful part, she was never given the chance to explain.
But the curse was not the end. It was the beginning of something far deeper. Time passed. Years, decades, maybe even centuries. No voice, no movement, no identity. Just awareness, trapped in stillness. Imagine that. To exist but not be seen. To feel but not be heard. To remember everything but be unable to speak even a single word. This was not punishment. This was isolation. And in that silence, one question kept echoing. Was I truly guilty or just misunderstood? This is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because it is no longer about Ahalya. It is about us. How quickly do we judge when we see only half the truth? How often do we confuse perception with reality? And more importantly, why is silence often treated as guilt? Ahalya did not fight back. She did not argue. And so the world decided her story for her. But is silence acceptance, or is it helplessness? Years later, the forest had forgotten her. The world had moved on. Until one day, a prince walked through that path. Rama. But he was not just a prince. He carried something rare. Not power, not authority, but clarity. Where others saw a curse, he saw truth hidden beneath it. Where others saw guilt, he saw a story waiting to be understood. And then, without judgment, without questioning, he simply acknowledged her. And that changed everything. In that single moment, the curse broke. Not because time ended it, not because punishment was complete, but because someone finally saw her without assumption. Ahalya was free, not just from stone, but from the identity forced upon her. So the real question is not whether Ahalya was right or wrong. The real question is this: how many people are judged not for what they did, but for what others believed they did? Was Ahalya cursed by fate, or by a world that chose judgment over understanding? And maybe that is why her story still lives. Because even today, the loudest pain is not accusation, it is silence that no one tries to understand.